the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. If we can stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Item 1.03. Approval revision of agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as written? Thank you, Cindy. And a second, Chrissy. All in favor? Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Great. Nobody opposed. All right, so we're going to go into reports. Item 2.01, presentation of the proposed 25-26 program transportation revenue budget.
I'll just use this. That's fine. Thank you, though. Okay, so we're at the third part of the budget program, transportation, and revenue components. With program, you can see here we've got athletics, benefits, regular school, special ed, and support. So they'll be the categories that we'll be talking about. So within program, we've got an increase of approximately $2.9 million. It's about 3.5%. Overall, the program budget's the largest part of the budget. It represents about $86 million. And the bottom bullet being the most important, there's no cuts projected to program or staffing, including mental health staffing and services. So the first item within program will be athletics. Some of the areas within athletics you can see there: AD, coaches, clerical trainer, equipment, contractual items, materials, and supplies. So within athletics you can see, again, left-hand side being the categories, and then in the middle being 24-25 current budget, and then 25-26 being projected budget. Salaries being the first one, you can see there the increase, and it's really represented by contractual agreements and budget to actual adjustments. We had a little bit of a shift. You can see in athletic equipment and supplies, it's really a shift in funding, represented for some new uniforms. And then CIRO services with another increase. That is really a budget to actual adjustment. It was previously under budget, and it's just something we trued back up to what it really is expected to be at this point. Benefits, the next area, you can see there, you can see some of the categories: ERS, TRS, Social Security, workers' comp, unemployment, and then the biggies being the health, dental, and vision insurance, and then retirement incentive and 403B contributions. So within benefits, you can see with ERS, the first bullet on the bottom, we had a higher rate this year at 15.23%, which is higher than last year at 14.1%, so the corresponding increase. And TRS had a slightly lesser rate from current year, so we projected a decrease of from 4.1 down to 3.9. Social Security, there was an increase. Really, it's based on the wages, higher increase in Social Security cost. Workers' comp, there's a slight decrease, and that's really due to a lower projected rate, and then some budget to actual adjustments, and then unemployment disability were relatively flat year over year. Health, dental, and vision, you can see there on the bottom for the main point. The increases really at this point we budgeted for is a 7% increase for the premiums. So that dental and vision, you can see there wasn't as extreme as it would be with the health insurance, because it's just a much larger number. But that $19 million does represent a 7% increase. Overall actual is projected somewhere around 6 point something, so there's a little bit of surplus in there, but for the most part, you don't know what your makeup's going to be based on hirings, et cetera, if somebody switches. So that 7% represents a little bit of surplus in there to cover stuff, things like that. And insurance buyouts projected to be flat. 403B retirement payouts. For the most part, you can see here that the second item down being retirement payouts, that's really the only thing significant on the page, and that's really decreased to a fewer projected staff retirements and the corresponding related payments that are tied to contractual agreements. Special ed's the next one. Again, salaries, equipment, contractual materials and supplies, and BOCES being the main categories. So within special ed, you can see salaries there, the first one. The second one being instructional, being at $2 million, then going up to the 2.379. That really represents some staffing changes there. We added one new staffing position, and then we had two other positions that we increased since last year's 24-25 budget. We've seen an increase in IEP needs. Psychologists, you can see a slight decrease, and that's really due to retirements and breakage. And then TAs being the big one, where you can see a little bit where it's an increase due to being a flat relatively, or a slight increase due to negotiated contractual increases. This is the one I was getting ready to talk about a little bit. So you can see on the bottom, BOCES is going to be the driver, and that's a significant change. 2.475 in the current year, and then going down to 1.589. So significant shift there from the BOCES needs. That's really due to a shift in the services. Basically, you've had some high-need students that are kind of going back into an FM-related instruction-based, 811, 1211, et cetera. So you have some of the students there that were currently at BOCES that would be coming back to FM. You'll see those corresponding shifts come through when I talk about the remaining rest of instruction. Contractual is the only other thing that was really increase in needs and cost, and it was really related to private placement student needs. I'll talk again, like I said, a little bit about that one a little bit further as we go. So regular school is the next thing. First thing being in-service training, and then BOCES cost there for development. It's really just an increase in professional development needs for the BOCES cost. Salaries, you can see there, negotiated contractual salary increases really for the teachers. TA, they added 2 TA positions, and there were contractual increases that represented that increase. Teacher aides being there, you can see a little bit of an increase, and that's really negotiated contractual increases. And there was a couple positions that were added that were needed after that 24-25 budget. Equipment, contractual materials and supplies. Equipment, we saw an increase, and that's really related to the high school capital project, an increase for equipment and furniture needs for the $52 million project. Contractual, you can see an increase in CIRO, and that's really related costs and needs based on the new contract, as well as some of the needs we have for CIRO related. And then materials and supplies was significant, and that was really due to the literacy program initiative for that. Are there any questions on that one at all? Okay. Tuition, textbooks, and BOCES. Tuition had a slight increase, and it's really due to charter school enrollment. We had a slight uptick there. Textbooks had a decrease. It's really just a shift in instructional needs, increased software, so you see a corresponding increase over on that side. And then BOCES had a slight increase due to higher prices. Pre-K, relatively small changes here. You can see in conferences, really it was recorded within the admin budget, so that was what that shift represented. And then the fees and dues, materials and supplies are relatively flat, and outside services was a slight increase due to additional service needs. Supports the next area, occupational ed, summer school, library audiovisual, IT department, guidance, health services, family school liaisons, co-curriculars, interfund transfer, and then BOCES services, what we'll talk about here. So within support, you can see the first thing being CTE. You had a decrease there. You're going from about 407,000 down to 367. That really represented fewer seats needed. Those seats are about almost $10,000 a piece. Summer school, there is a decrease there, and that really represents, as you can see on that second bullet, it's due to the literacy program that we're going to be having construction, as you can see on the bottom part of that sentence, with the roofing, safety, and security construction going on in district buildings. That'll be something that we won't have this year. Library and AV, IT, those are relatively flat year over year, and guidance the same. So continued support, we got health and medical, and mental health services, family school liaisons, co-curriculars, and interfund transfer. With health services, there was salary breakage. We do have one additional nurse projected at the high school. Co-curriculars were primarily due to yearbook club. So in that case, we actually had a decrease. The general fund is no longer involved with the purchase of yearbooks or reimbursement revenue, and the club handles all that activity, so there was a slight shift over into that. And then interfund transfer to special aid was really due to a need to add a special ed summer school class, and so that's what that additional cost is for that. Mental health services, this is a slide I think we talked about in the past. I thought we'd put it up and just get a chance to kind of show what we do currently have and are projected to have for the upcoming year. You can see there at the top part represents some of the staffing we've got. So family school liaisons, there's 6 of them, 1 at each school. Counselors, we have 13. Elementary school, there's 1 in each building. Middle schools, 2 at each building. In the high school, we have 6. Psychologists, 1 in each building, and then 1 district level for the psychologists. The next step in there we've got is collaborating with Contact Community Services and CNY Mental Health. In this case, we had a slight shift with the personnel, and you can see there that Dominic Malera represents the change there from Mr. DeSantis. And we'll be continue to work with the Student Assistance Program counselors with the drop-in clinics, continue triaging with CNY Mental Health Counseling, and then the surveys with RMS. And then at the bottom, you can see that we're continuing with Tier 1 with the Promise Zone, Fayette, Enders Road, and Mott Road, and then Tier 2 Access Helpline, and then a Rise on-site therapy. So again, it's just basically a snapshot. It's what we had in the past year and projected to have in the current year as well. Transportation's next. You can see an increase of about $149,000, represents about 2.57. Overall transportation budget is about $6 million. So within transportation, you have salaries, materials and supplies and transportation equipment. So within those, you can see the first item being directors and dispatchers, slight increase there, and it just really represents those negotiated contractual agreements. Sub bus drivers, it's really a budget to actual adjustment for the sub bus drivers, change there. And then the bus attendants, you can see there's an increase there, and that's really a need for additional bus attendants due to additional student needs. Again, that shift from BOCES kind of showing through from that side, but that's, again, another adjustment from budget to actual, I would say. Some of the other services, your contractual services, BOCES, equipment, and then materials and supplies. Equipment was basically to purchase an item, service for air conditioning on buses for a piece of equipment. And then materials and supplies, there's a projected increase, materials and supplies due to the overall rise in prices, fuel, parts, tires, things of that nature. For the component standpoint, you can kind of see here from the three-part, I think we've talked about it a little bit, kind of what those represent and some of the thresholds that they are. So you can see administrative being the smallest, a little under 9%. I think the measurable is usually somewhere around 10. Capital sitting at 17.3 or $20 million worth of budget, and program being the largest component, sitting at about 74%, and it's about $86 million. So again, the vast majority kind of does meet that threefold criteria where you've got that 70, give or take, and then the 20, and then the 10. From the three-part, you'll see this as we go out and put that in the newsletter. That's something I think we've done historically here. So that's the program portion. You can see it broken out, and then the corresponding components that are on there. Overall, and again, at the bottom and on the right-hand side there, you can see that roughly $86 million represented into program. It's an increase of about 3.24%. Same for administration and capital, that breakout. You can see administration broken out over there on the top part being at $10.4 million, capital being that $20.1, and the key thing there being 11.5% increase. And again, that goes back to the last budget session we talked about, and it's really going to be that piece where you're going to see that capital bond anticipation notes, where you'll see kind of in the middle of that bottom slide that increase from the $715,000 to $2.6 million, and that really represents that additional debt that came on with the capital project without the corresponding aid yet. And we'll talk again about that as I go further too with additional slides. So the overview for expenditures, if you took everything and kind of put it in a nutshell and did a summary, and this is kind of what it would represent. So overall at the bottom, you can see that $5.2 million increase on the budget. And how's it made up from an expenditure standpoint? Those are really the four components that make it up. So salaries, negotiated forecasted contracts represents an increase of approximately $2.4 million. Health insurance and benefits, an increase of about $1.4. The capital transfer, there was a reduction. We went from $1.5 million down to $1 million. So there's a $500,000 reduction. And then debt service is overall represented by a $1.9 million increase. And the vast majority of it is that bond anticipation note increase, where we have that increase being somewhere around that 1.4 mark. So that really represents expenditures overall, and we'll talk about revenues in a second to how we're going to basically pay for everything. So revenue, again, you got the pie chart similar to what we had with expenses, and you can kind of see what the breakout is. You kind of got that 2/3, 1/3, if you will. Tax levy being about 64.5%, state aid at roughly about 30%, and then other revenue somewhere around 5.5%. And that's the makeup of the three parts of the main components of revenue. And those top parts you can see up there, state aid, property, and other revenue. So state aid, if you look in the middle, you'll see state aid in the prior year budgeted $34 million, approximately $30.6. Current year projected to be $34.8, an increase of about $800,000 or 2.4%. Accounts for approximately around 30% of FM revenues being state aid. And this was attributed to, as you can see at the bottom, foundation aid, BOCES aid, and transportation aid. Foundation aid was a slight increase. BOCES aid and transportation aid is what I call the spend-based aids. So the more you spend, ideally, the more aid you generate. So state aid by categories and dollars. You can see left-hand side again being those components, middle being current budget, and then projected, and then the changes. So foundation, you saw an increase of about $480,000. You can see at the bottom, the top of the bottom there, formula-based aid increase in $480,000. BOCES aid next, and it was really an increase to added services and of the corresponding aid. And then the high-cost aid was being the next one. You saw the decrease there, and that decrease is really due to less students, again, generating that high-cost aid. So that shift in BOCES where you're pulling away the students from the BOCES programs back into FM, if the expense goes down, then the corresponding aid is, you have that residual effect from that. Transportation aid being the last one, you see an increase of about $340,000. It's basically spending-based again. More spending you have generated a higher amount of aid. So overall, about $830,000. If you take everything and kind of squish it together, that's what you get to for overall with that. The next thing is property taxes. You'll see in the middle, you'll see the levy was at 72.5 last year, 3.49% or 2.45 increase. This year the cap is projected to be 3.56. 2.6 is the maximum increase. We're proposing to go out at 3.56 with that $2.6 million increase. So the cap and the actual levy would be the same. I think originally I was projecting somewhere around that same ballpark, and this we would adjust a little bit with debt and things of that nature. That's where it actually ended up coming out at 3.56 amount. So if you see on the bottom, this is a piece I hate putting up, but at the same time there is some value to it, but it's a kind of a crystal ball effect. So the tax rate on a $100,000 home, at this point projected to be somewhere around $54. That's really using, that's the key part on the bottom, using 10% assessment increase. So we're talking to the assessor, a little bit ago and kind of going through what expectations are. I know it's been something that's kind of happened over the last couple of years. That's something I would forecast kind of seeing in that ballpark or somewhere in that 10%. So I did the same for what we have for assessments, but I did use prior year equalization rates, and it popped out somewhere around 54. If those equalization rates change significantly, that number would also change significantly as well. But for the most part, I think that's probably a decent basis to start kind of having discussions for folks at that 54 mark. Are there any questions for that?
I know that we've gotten a lot of questions about this, and I think in general this is on people's mind. How much of our budget is based on federal funding?
How much of our budget is based on?
Revenue.
How much of our revenue is on
Yeah.
federal funding? There's nothing in this one that's really federal funding at all. UPK is really the only thing that kind of rolls into where you see it from an aid perspective. There's funding that comes in kind of in one-offs where we've had some fortune lately where we've gotten stuff from Assemblyman Sturpey and Senator Mannion with some one-off. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, like at the, Federal Department of Education, if it's still
Oh,
exists.
if there's changes to that.
Yeah, is that something, because I know that some districts are going to potentially be more
Gotcha.
widely impacted
Now I
than
know where you're going.
others.
Okay.
So I'm just.
Yeah, so if there's any changes to the federal level, what's that going to mean for us? The good news for us is the fact that the bad news that, we're 66 or 65% or whatever that is percent state, property tax based. So for us, it's a less amount from an aid perspective. That being said, we have items from UPK, Title I, Title II, 611, 619. We would be looking at those to see what there would be from an impact standpoint. At this point, I'm not sure if there's anything significant that I'm aware of that would change that would be dramatic. The current budget, based on from general fund, nothing's I've got in there that would change or anything known. I'm not sure if Dr. Tice has anything from his standpoint. Okay. But as far as changes or anything, I haven't heard anything or whatever, so the big thing for us would be simply, I guess, looking at that dollar amount and then planning for, what that would entail. The good news is one of the things we'll have, you won't see it here, but we can certainly talk about it when we do a summary overview, is you have reserves. We've got, somewhere in that $17 million mark. If there's something that has to change, everything here, I would project to be fully funded for programs and resources with the current budget and everything that we're able to do. And if there was something changing that from that, that Title I, Title II, 611, 619, it's certainly something we would address probably.
Well, we're hearing, and I'm sure Brad is hearing as well through ASBO, that in all likelihood this year, before they roll up the sidewalks and turn off the lights, it'll be the following year, and we'll see it coming. But for a lot of this, it's going to be a pass-through to the states anyhow.
Okay, thank you. Other revenue is the next item. It represents about $6 million. Again, smallest part of the revenue budget there. You can see some of the items, and I'll go through those in detail on the next slide. So you can see there's the items. Again, left-hand side being the different ones. The main ones, you can kind of see the increase, decrease over to the right, what's going on. Interest, it's basically, we had been conservative in the past year. We really kind of trued it up more to actual. So there's an increase there at $300,000. And again, it's really just a change in budget from budget to actual. The next one, prior year refunds. It's really just, it's kind of one of those you're looking at a crystal ball, but the last couple of years we've kind of been somewhere in that ballpark, so we felt comfortable with that increase of about $100,000. And then the main one, the whole driver of basically the budget at this point is that bottom one, the assigned fund balance. So you can see in the prior year, you're at about $1 million. You can see the one above it in the prior year at $1,099,000. So when you're putting together your budget, you're basically getting to the point of you got all your expenditures and then you have your corresponding revenues. How do you balance the budget? Ideally, you got corresponding revenues and expenditures. It ties out and it nets. In our case, you're basically going to have two items that are going to be needed to make that come to fruition. So use of reserves, it's something we've had that we've got from debt reserves, use for project, et cetera. And that's $1 million sitting there on that one, the second line up. And then the assigned fund balance. That's really your key one that you want to focus on. So your difference between how to balance that budget, in this case, this scenario, you needed $2.3 million to balance the budget. So for our case, what does it mean? So it's basically, you're increasing $1.3 million in the prior year of how you're going to balance it. So when we started putting together the budget this year, we started, I think, about a $3.9 million deficit with increase in what we're going to pay in debt. We knew it was coming. It was a situation where the capital project isn't done yet. The corresponding aid hasn't flowed. So you've got the debt that has started because there has been payments made on it. So what we've done is we appropriated some of the money and we've paid it in 24-25 using surplus funds. And the remaining part is basically sitting here in assigned fund balance with anything else we could look at to how we could reduce the budget to pay for that. In the end, we were left about with that 1.268 number that needed to balance the budget. We do have surplus built into the budget somewhat to cover that, but in the end, it's kind of one of those where we've talked to everybody. We really need everybody to, hold the line with what they've budgeted for and keep actual in line with that. Now, we know there's at certain times where there's unfunded mandates or there's, issues that pop up. So there are some things in there. I think at the last meeting, Dan was kind enough to bring up the point talking about electric and gas and some of the significant shifts we've seen to the point where we've got unknowns with tariffs and other nature. We also, in your case, talking about, anything from federal program to that. We're fortunate we got those corresponding reserves, but in the end, you are left with that $1.3 million. So in a utopian world, you're basically spending what you said you're going to spend. You got the corresponding revenues. I don't know what the governor's budget, when that comes out, we'll see what that's at. Ideally, we're going to get the aid we receive. If there's something less or more, that's usually the line that I adjust. I don't tend to go into program because at this point, program's been scrutinized pretty heavily from an admin perspective. I think they're pretty comfortable with what they've laid out and their plans for what they're going to need for instruction or co-curriculars or sports, things of that nature. That's usually the number in my last, 12 years of doing this that I've kind of played with a little bit in the appropriated fund balance. So if there is additional aid given, that's probably the area where I'd reduce that appropriated fund balance. If it was something significant that comes out in the governor's budget that's really going to affect that wildly, then we'd probably take a second look and say, is there something else we need to do? Do we need to use reserves towards it? Is there something from an EBLAR perspective, ERS, TRS, things that we currently have in the budget, it's just those reserve funds could help with. So I know that was a lot, and I know that was an item that's probably going to be kind of driving it, but that's the one you've seen probably from that first slide back when I started, or first area of slides I started talking about with debt. That's kind of where it pops out back at the bottom end. Are there questions about that? Because that was a lot.
Well, Brad, I'd just like to say thanks. I know that this is not easy and this is a long process. So, again, just to highlight the good news for the community is because we are fortunate in that, we're not making any cuts. So I think that's just a key to highlight. There are some other districts that are not in the same position that we are. So feel very fortunate and really appreciate you and all the administrative staff for really digging in and being able to hold the line. Because this year will be tough, and next year it probably won't be any easier. So, again, thank you.
Thanks for the good news after, too. No pressure. So that's the gist there, and again, to that slide, and that's that third one that's down from there. So again, that similar concept where we took expenditures and put it onto one slide. This is the one I kind of use, for folks when I go out and do the budget road shows or for staff, et cetera. I usually try to take the expense one and take the revenue one. So the revenue one, state aid, again, $800,000 increase projected, again, driven by that foundation, trans aid, and BOCES aid. Tax levy, 3.56% overall, $2.6 million. And then that other revenue, and that's kind of the one I was just driving home with that $1.3 million fund balance you can see there. So the other revenue increase at 1.8, property tax levy 2.6, state aid 800,000. There's your total. So if you took the two slides, 5.2 with expenditures going up, there's your 5.2 of revenue. Included in that revenue, though, is that 1.3 appropriating a fund balance. So next steps overall, April 21st will be the budget. Board adoption will be the same date, April 21st. Budget hearing May 12th, and budget vote May 20th. So that overall, I'll talk a little bit more there. We'll get into some of the different items, but I don't anticipate at this point anything that I haven't seen or heard. The only thing might be the fact of kind of see what that governor's budget. Dr. Tice?
And Mr. Catalino, in keeping on the praise, also could have mentioned there's a few districts going out at supermajorities this year that I think the public will note. In part, credit to you and your business office team because you navigated a high school construction project that might have made us one of those districts needing to go out for a supermajority, but it's all been crafted to save positions, but to stay within the tax levy limit. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. I am fortunate. I do believe we have the best business office in the state. I'm not afraid to tell everybody because I think I have. So we've worked real hard on it, and we're hopeful that everything comes to fruition. Next year is going to be a challenge. We've started already looking out at it, sadly. So I don't know if it's a good thing, bad thing, but we are going to be aware, and we'll have to figure out what that looks like. So at this point, there is good news. There are no projected cuts. You will hear about it. You'll see it. There are folks that are district-wise. They're going to be going out with supermajority. It's not us. So the big thing is, just trying to figure out how do we maintain program resources and keep it going. So doing a good thing. Are there any other questions? Dan?
Can we just translate that for some people who might not understand the lingo of what you're using of going out for a supermajority is those are budgets that in order to raise enough tax revenue on the tax levy to meet their budget, they have to go beyond the tax cap, which requires a supermajority vote of the voters as opposed to a simple majority when you stay at or below the tax cap, which is where you've been able to keep us.
Correct.
Just want to.
Yep. No, you did a good job of that. There'll be a slide on the next one, stealing a little bit of thunder, but it talks about kind of where we've been at, and it's been somewhere around that 3.5%. In that ballpark, you'll see some, I think, as high, maybe, I don't know what Dr. Tice has heard, but I've heard maybe somewhere 7. And these are some of these districts that I don't, what's the right word? They probably can't afford to not get the money at the same time for some of the stuff they've already faced with cuts and reductions and things of that nature. So we're not in that ballpark, and I'm happy about that. I don't know how they're going to navigate it, but for us, we've gotten to the point where I'm pretty comfortable with this.
But as the facilities committee knows, dealing with the bans and the bonds as we get into and we're past the midpoint on the high school capital improvement project,
Yeah.
it requires some choreography and some navigation, just in terms of the long-term financing. The saying that we use in the facilities committee is that a community votes twice on a capital project. The first to authorize it, which they did back a few Decembers ago, and the second, does it impact the operating budget? And I think, as Mr. Seidberg pointed out, your business office and you have worked it so it stays within the tax cap and doesn't really influence, a supermajority vote going forward and navigating all that comes with a capital improvement project.
It's probably been the hardest budget, like I said last time, that we've had to put together, and we knew it backwards and forwards. So I think there's probably about every code we could tell you in our sleep, which is scary, but The big thing was more of that debt piece. It was real interesting kind of going through and peeling it apart and trying to figure out, when's the right time to go, when's the right time not to from that aspect. So everything from paying down early and doing that, what's the corresponding long term? I think we saved probably about $200,000 a year for the next 15 years doing what we did. So we're proud of that. I don't know how much you'll see it come through with, end product, but in the end, I think it was the right thing where this is tight, and then I just got done telling Sarah a little bit about it. Preliminary wise, is just kind of that's where we got to. So I believe we can get there. I think everybody's got to have to follow that budget, but I think for the long run, over that time period, it's a better thing for the district. I think it's a better thing, for taxpayers, et cetera. So it is a sign, of things to come a little bit, to Jason's point, where you're seeing it in these other districts. It's not us yet, but we're fortunate enough we had some opportunity to be able to, have the excess funds and surplus with the current year that we're able to pay down, but we're just putting it back into the product. So that's the big thing around here, of where that's the goal: minimize taxes, keep money going into the capital, transfers, as well as the capital reserves, and thus minimize taxpayer impact and keep everything going and maintaining program. So that's where I think we got to. I don't know if Rebecca, if you had anything.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Rebecca, you go. Yeah, I just want to kind of double down on what you just said, Brett, because I think this budgeting in a private business is not the same as a school district in many respects, where we're dependent on spending money before we get aid on the money, and so debt comes before revenue, often in different years.
Which I hate, but
wildly. Yes. And it's just, I appreciate the work that you've been doing on this, because what some but not all in this community know is that we have tremendous needs across our buildings and a lot of work that's remaining, and this is a very choreographed process of what can be done and paid for and staying within the budget, with debt coming before aid on many of these, that the priority remains our educational spaces in all of these facility projects, and secondly, obviously, the safety and security of all of our staff and students. And I don't know, secondarily, those go hand in hand, obviously, but choreographing that to stay within the tax cap on a budget increase. I'll just ask you perhaps the same question.
Sure. Without
preparing. We didn't rehearse this, that I ask you every year on the budget, because I think it's important to hear. This is a $116 million budget. The discretionary part, the non-contractual, non-obligated part of that budget is like 3%, in that range. Am I correct on that?
Well, the question, I think it goes back to, I think it originated from this slide, was where it became in the past, and we talked a little bit about those items and what those are. So to Dan's point, discretionary, non-discretionary, et cetera. Salaries, it's just exactly what it says. It's a negotiated, forecasted contract. It's a fixed number, essentially. You have a little bit of, variation with when you're negotiating, but not really. Health insurance, it's locked in. You're going usually 6-7%, seems to be the kind of where we've been for the last few years. Cap transfer, that's discretionary, but in the end, and I know, there's roughly $90 million worth of work. So you can do whatever you can from a maximum cost allowance to what voter fatigue could offer, but in the end, you're still trying to come up with some kind of cap transfer piece where you can cover some portion. And debt service, that's locked in. So right there is $5.2 million out of that 116, and it's really, at that point, it's not discretionary. It's basically a fixed number. It's just to what extent. Programs, resources, some of the other stuff, you could say it is to some extent, but to me here, it's a non-negotiable. So
discretionary maybe is the wrong word, because these are things that our community wants, needs, and we provide in the district. It's my point being that, as with all prior years, virtually all of the budget is driven by contractual obligations that are set long before the current budget year.
Yep.
Thanks, Brad.
Yep. Rebecca, I don't know if you had any.
This is kind of going back into the weeds, but you were cruising on the presentation, and I didn't want to interrupt you, so I apologize. But I was just wondering, with respect to special education, we talked about almost $1 million reduction due to a shift in BOCE services for internal district-based instruction. I just wanted to clarify, is that a kind of a universal decision that's being made, or is it based on more seeing needs of the students that we want to address in the district in a more customized approach?
We have that game show where you can phone a friend, right? Is that kind of that? Because I have the one picked out that I would ask to talk to if she was here and available in the audience. If I could just see her somewhere, but I think that was one of the shifts. I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about it. We've talked about it last year, kind of what that was going to mean. So as we go through the budgeting process, we go through and start in the beginning, roughly around November, and look at BOCES and identify students with corresponding needs and what we think for projected costs. And then we talk a little bit about internal program. So I don't know if you wanted to take from that a little bit.
Specifically,
I thought I gave her enough time to get up here.
money from BOCES back to district?
How we basically are taking like some of the high need services, bringing them back to FM, talking the 811, 1211s, things of that
Yeah,
nature.
so you had it right. So we've been fortunate enough to be able to open some special classes right here in district. And it was planned for our incoming students. This year we had a large kindergarten population that required special programming. All of those kids would have ended up likely in BOCES programs. So we started that this year, which actually saved ahead of the game the money we would have spent at BOCES. Throughout the last 2 years, we've offered other special classes in district and enhanced just special ed time with teachers, which has allowed us to keep students home in our district and not send them at BOCES. So over the course of the 4 years that I've been here, our BOCES kids in special education programs has gone from 32 to, I think there's 14 or 15 currently this year. So half reduction, and everyone back here in with their neighborhood friends. Was that what you were looking for?
It was, thank
Okay,
you for
thanks.
clarifying.
So that was really that shift that kind of we talked about, and kind of, and there is corresponding increases there, as we talked about, from instructional to, monitoring to buses, et cetera. But in the end, it's the right thing, so. Is there anything else?
Thank you very much, Brad.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Item 2.02, President's Report. Have a couple of things. So if you remember, several meetings ago, Sandy and Sarah did a very theatrical presentation about the migration from board docs to Diligent, and they needed some support for people who would be willing to help with that transition and looking at which things to move over and how, or versus archiving. So they're at the point where they would love some volunteers. They thought no more than maybe 2 hours of time to do that. So if anyone from the board is willing to do that, you may volunteer now, or you can get a hold of Sarah, whichever you prefer.
Can you
Sarah,
explain? I'm sorry,
Yep.
Jason.
Oh, no, I just wanted to volunteer Marissa. She said she wanted to do it. I'm pretty sure she said that as I'm looking around the table.
What does this entail?
Sandy, can you give a little?
I'm sorry.
When you need some of the board members to help with determining which things to archive, right?
Yes, correct. So we're looking for just your feedback on what you feel is valuable in the library to keep, and things that there might be.
Maybe most frequently used, right? Because
Yes.
we're not getting rid of anything. So it's
Exactly.
really just our most frequently accessed documents or items that we want to make sure we keep at our fingertips versus being archived you can still find them, it's just they're not right there on the platform, correct?
Correct. That way it condenses everything down. It makes it easier to use because you're not
Scrolling
looking
through
through.
5,000 things.
Yes.
So if anybody feels compelled to
I'm
volunteer-
happy to help with that.
Oh, look at Ian, gold star.
The new guy has to do this stuff.
Sarah, I'm happy to help too, so. Anybody else? If you change your mind. Yeah, if you change your mind, that's an opportunity. Secondly, Dr. Cook sent around a scheduling worksheet to try to lock in some dates for interviews. I know it's like predicting the future, but if you guys could try to at least put if you know of any vacations or definitely days that you're not available, if you could put those in there so we could try to, as far in advance, put some dates in place for interviews for the superintendent search. And additionally, I wanted to congratulate all the students and staff and advisors who worked so hard on the Wellwood production of James and the Giant Peach. I heard it was fantastic, so congratulations to everybody who did that. And then also all the folks who participated in the dance marathon over the weekend. Over $145,000 raised by our students, which is phenomenal. So congratulations to everyone who participated in that. Very humbled and that's all I have, unless anybody has any other thing. Oh, I know it was happening this week. So yeah, our brochure is out for the superintendent search. So we're live collecting applicants through middle of June this year. So and then we'll see where we go from there. So exciting. Thank you. All right, item 2.03, superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Fitzgerald. Item 1, capital project update. As mentioned before, the recently approved $15.4 million roofing safety and security project is beginning to ramp up in anticipation of a busy summer on our campus. In fact, the regional summer school and the town of Manlius' summer theater program have been moved to the Jamesville-DeWitt Central School District for this summer only. The major high school construction project continues, and the temporary passageway in the courtyard to provide some cover for students during the winter months will be removed going into the spring break so that the work on the cafeteria expansion and courtyard will be able to continue throughout the spring and summer. School Start Time Committee. As mentioned before, our School Start Time Committee continues to meet in order to recommend potential new alignments in accordance with the proposed bills that are in front of the Senate and the Assembly. The committee has added faculty members and will soon add other staff members, such as the Transportation Department, as well as students and their family members in the months ahead. The committee is not only looking at adjusting start times as a possibility, but exploring revisions to the existing bell schedules in order to take full advantage of these new facilities, such as the expanded high school cafeteria. The committee has added questions to the upcoming RMS School Culture and Climate Survey that's being dispatched to families, I believe at 5 p.m. tonight. I encourage all families to respond to this most important survey to share their thoughts about potential changes to school start times. Speaking of that, the RMS Climate Survey is being released, so on behalf of the entire governance team, I'd like to encourage all family members to fill that out. It's the parent version, and it will include questions about the school start times, as just mentioned, and the impending gubernatorial student cell phone policy, which is to be in place by August 1st, 2025. As a reminder, the Family School Climate and Culture Survey is both anonymous and confidential, as it's managed by Research and Marketing Strategies, which is a neutral third-party vendor out of Baldwinsville, New York. And you may recall that we won our Lighthouse Award for community alignment and engagement. And the banner our district clerk brought here that is accompanied by the award that we're going to display at the district office. Item next, Parent Council. Next edition of Parent Council at 9 a.m. Tuesday, April 1st. And that's no April Fool's joke. Will be held in person and virtually. This iteration will feature a discussion about our academic program. The final installment will be on Thursday, May 1st, and will include an overview of the proposed budget that will go before the taxpayers later in May. Upcoming special events. As a reminder, the district will be holding 2 special events in the weeks ahead. The FM Diversity Coalition will be hosting a cultural festival on Saturday, April 5th from noon to 1:30 p.m. in the high school cafeteria. In addition, our FM Zen group, which sponsored this year's Big Read, will host the rescheduled community event and mental health panel session on Monday, May 5th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. in the FM High School auditorium. Congratulations to our winter scholar athletes. I take great pleasure extending our congratulations to our scholar athlete teams for the winter sports season. All 11 of FM's winter varsity teams earned scholar athlete designation, and 208 student athletes earned a GPA of 90 or higher. And then, like President Fitzgerald, congratulations to all the students who participated in the high school and Wellwood musicals. It's with hornet pride we'd like to congratulate our student thespians, student musicians, and student technicians at both the high school and Wellwood Middle School for presenting wonderful school musicals over the course of the past month. The high school musical highlighted members of our talented senior class both on the stage in the orchestra pit and behind the scenes. And the Wellwood musical, much like the Eagle Hill musical from this past autumn, showcased the talents of the student performing artists who will soon grace the stage, the pit, and the backstage at the high school. Well done to all. And then, once again, echoing congratulations for the dance marathon. Extend my sincere appreciation to the dance marathon students who raised a record $145,000 plus for Camp Good Days and Special Times. It's one of FM's longest standing traditions and brings together students for a wonderful and worthwhile charity that is dedicated to children throughout upstate New York. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Sorry if I stole your thunder. Sorry, not sorry.
You can have my questions if anybody asks.
Item 2.04.
Well,
Oh, sorry. Oh, you guys have questions? There you go. Moving on.
no, I was just going to say, Dr. Tyson, or maybe Daryl, maybe you know, the bills that are sitting in the Senate and the Assembly for New York State, what are, I believe I read somewhere, isn't there a minimum time they're talking about in those bills? I was just wondering what that is, and just for the benefit of the community, just so they know what's out there.
Great question, Mr. Catalino. No elementary school to start before 8 o'clock, and no secondary school to start before 8:30. So we just, as we go through this whole exercise, we want to make sure that we don't have to repeat ourselves or have a mulligan or a do-over. So we just want to make sure we're congruent with that if New York ends up being like California and making a statewide switch. Good question.
Oh, I just have a question on the start time committee. So for multiple meetings now and months now, we get the update that the committee's been meeting and will eventually add more people to it. But we also said at the beginning that student voice in this was very important and family voice was very important. My concern as we keep getting these updates that, well, they'll be added later, are they going to be added at a point where this committee has already gone so far through the process that things are pretty well cast in stone, or are they going to be brought in at a time where they actually will be able to provide meaningful input into what is worked on?
Great question. I equate it much like, as we all remember from our biology or living environment, the coarse adjustment on a microscope and the fine adjustment. As this committee moves forward, as you know, we've been exploring whether we can accommodate and change bus schedules and routing in order to pull this off. Then as we add each group, whether it's the instructional component, worried about not only instructional day, but also conforming to the requirements from New York State in terms of the 990 hours and 900 hours per year, but also interscholastic athletics and off-campus jobs and internships. And then we want to certainly involve our staffing units, whether it's transportations or buildings and grounds. But yes, the intent is to bring on the students. The reason doing it in a piecemeal fashion, and this is a great question, is each group takes ownership. I mean, it's almost like handing a baton off. It's great to have everybody together, but sometimes voices get silenced, and we kind of saw that in the Wellwood conversation. I think we ended up where we wanted to be, but some groups took, more of a lead than others. This one here, because it's so precarious, I mean, it could be scuttled by any group as we go along. I think the administration wanted to prove, yes, it can be done. And now the questions become, should it be done? And then for the sake of adding the parents and students at the end, will it impact childcare? What are the needs? So we're keeping, to answer your question, as many different options open as possible. And so as we hand the baton off each time, it isn't like this is the final decision, take it or leave it. I think it's going from that coarse adjustment of the microscope to the fine adjustment and bringing everything into focus. But our intent, and this is where I thought you were going with your question, was to give the community, like Webster did, like Fairport did, a year advance notice. So we want to be prepared. This kind of report won't be going on forever. By September, we want to be able to share with everybody we can do it, or for these reasons, it can't be done or got scuttled. The one thing I did tell the group is that we are going to have to rework and make sure we're in compliance with the 990 hours as that goes through K-12. I mean, that's the one thing I should leave for the new superintendent. With all the construction that's been going on, it's been great. As the facilities committee knows, we've improved our infrastructure, but now we want to make sure that we're in compliance with the requisite number of hours. So at the very minimum, even if we don't adjust start times, we're going to come out with a modified bell schedule. We just have to. Great question. Thank you.
So Dr. Tice, related to that, I believe at both the middle schools and at the high school level, they do, on Tuesdays, we vote for a variety of topics to get feedback from the students. Is that data collected? And I believe one of the topics at one point was about the scheduling of the classes at the high school. I'm just curious if that's rolled up and given to that committee, or
Yeah,
how
I mean,
that
I know,
information's
I
used.
can check with the principals. I know they save it, and maybe we can plant a few questions there at that level just to gauge interest, yeah.
Yeah, I would hate to have, if we're asking students for feedback and then, if we're making sure that we're putting it to use
There seems to
wherever
be
possible.
good point. There seems to be a general excitement. A lot of you do social media more than I do. I'm too, which is not at all. I'm running a school district, but but I think there's a general excitement, is what I'm being told, on social media in terms of the switch, that even transportation, I think if you were to ask some folks in transportation, they're worried that it's going to mean fewer bus runs, less time, hours. I don't see that. I see a lot of parents taking advantage of the elementary early, and then the secondary students hopping on the bus to come in. I think a lot of our families transport the students to the high school, so they're not, getting here too early in the morning. And so, again, from what I'm being told on social media, there seems to be a general excitement that more families will avail themselves of the transportation, especially for the secondary students.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions?
There's just this rumor that high school students like to sleep in, so I hear that they want to start later. So I don't think you're going to get pushback from the high school kids.
Well, all kidding aside, tongue in cheek, as we saw when Dr. Daniel Lewin was here, and I know it was pre-COVID, if you look at the data and the surveys and focus groups, we all agreed as a community to exactly that point, that adolescent students like to sleep in. And so the question is, we couldn't decide how best to solve it. Was it a flip and slide? Was it a slide? In many ways, that you mentioned the Senate and Assembly bill, and it may take forever to get them through, or it'll happen quickly like it did in California. I think what's before us is the solution, getting in line with the solution. We don't have to argue, is it flip and slide, is it slide? I think using the Senate and the Assembly bills as bumpers, as guides, I think will keep us on the straight and narrow and just become congruent with that.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Item 2.04, committee and Transportation updates. Daryl, do you have anything?
I hope you all had a chance to complete your survey. The survey's closed out on March 21st. We should be getting our resolution kits around April 9. Of course, we hope that the budget will be finished by April 1st in the state. So the budget priorities have been set by NYSBA, and stay tuned for that. Otherwise, I think I would encourage everybody to join Indivisible or Surge or something to save our democracy.
A little PS. Does any of the committees have anything that they really want to make sure is shared? Okay. And unfortunately, ESUM's not available tonight. Okay. Moving along to item 3.01, public comment. I believe we have 2 students who wanted to talk to us. I don't know if you guys want to do it together or separate. Surin and Sadie. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
Do you want to, yeah, you can come over here if you'd like to. Are you okay with your father or whomever taking a photo of you?
He's a photographer, so.
Oh, he's a photographer.
He's a professional.
Well,
photo
that's
taker.
great.
So as long as that red light's on, everyone will be able to hear you.
Okay,
I'm gonna
perfect.
start
Hello, thank you very much for your time. My name is Sadie Gittner, and this is Surin Bong. We are juniors at Fayetteville-Manlius High School and the current president and vice president of American Sign Language Club. We are here tonight to present our case for the creation of an American Sign Language course for students at Fayetteville-Manlius High School. The club was originally created by a hard of hearing student named Kayla Houston in 2018. Her goal was to create an environment in which people can learn American Sign Language and educate themselves on deaf culture. ASL club members, our advisor, Ms. Brennan, and both of us here tonight strongly believe that it is important for our school community to be more knowledgeable about ASL. We believe that it would open up a world of possibilities for our students and allow them to achieve a greater understanding of the world around them. Around 250,000 Americans use ASL as their main form of communication. This includes not only deaf and hard of hearing individuals, but also people with other disabilities and those who have ASL users in their lives. Today, ASL Club is thriving with an active membership of around 27 and an Instagram community of 87. We learn from YouTube videos online and play classic games like Telephone and Hangman during club. Every month, we aim to hold meetings that students are excited to attend and that are educational. One of the club's most awesome accomplishments was filming the Pledge of Allegiance in ASL for the 2025 school year. The video is shown every morning in classrooms across FM High School. This is one way that we have already begun to spread awareness. An ASL course would allow students to incorporate ASL into their everyday schedule, compared to just bi-monthly club meetings. They would have the option to learn from an experienced educator of whom they can ask questions and converse with. Students would also be able to earn credits towards their high school diplomas and potentially college credit as well. Offering an ASL class would educate not only the students enrolled in the course, but the whole FM community in the importance of learning ASL and being able to communicate with those with disabilities. We believe that knowing ASL would be a huge asset to our high schoolers when applying to jobs and thinking about future careers. ASL is also super fun to learn and can be very engaging and interactive in an otherwise monotonous school day.
In December of last year, students completed a survey on their thoughts of an ASL course, and we were able to collect data from 200 of students from the high school, which we assessed to discover that 65.5% favorably viewed an ASL course being offered to them. And this demonstrates a school-wide interest in a future course and is promising for future class enrollment as well. There are hundreds of thousands of deaf individuals in the U.S., and as aforementioned, around half of them utilize ASL to communicate. Despite this, formal courses in ASL were not established until the 1970s, and there's also always been a negative social attitude towards people who used ASL. By introducing high school students to ASL, the school district could foster greater awareness of the different ways people communicate and allow all types of people to coexist with empathy and understanding towards each other. As officers of ASL Club, Sadie and I have been discussing this idea since last school year, and then in November of 2024, we began to initiate real progress through meetings with Mr. McNamara, Mrs. Woodward-Jones, and most recently, Dr. Tice. Over the past few months, we've been able to collect insight on the various logistical aspects of what it would be like to create an ASL course. We've closely considered things such as finding a teacher and also how ASL as a language could decrease enrollment in other world languages. As a solution to this latter component, we hope to create ASL as an elective rather than another world language. This would mutually benefit students and language teachers, allowing for more flexibility and opportunity. Many schools across the state are already offering ASL courses, and with FM's reputation for having a diverse array of electives, we believe that ASL should be next. ASL Club believes that offering a class to students would encourage creativity and improve our school's social environment to be more open and empathetic. After all, ASL isn't from another country, it's right here in the US, in central New York, in our grocery stores, doctor's offices, and restaurants. Teaching students ASL would allow those who do use ASL in their daily lives as their main form of communication to feel seen and understood by others. Thank you all for your time, and we hope that you will give some consideration to our proposal. We are committed to making this idea into reality and look forward to your support in future communications. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you so much for your advocacy and for coming to speak with us. So determining programming is not part of the responsibility per se of the board, but it's great that you're in contact with Dr. Tice, and I don't know if you can keep them
No,
in the
they've
loop of the
been
process.
delightful to work with. We've had a few meetings. Ms. Wade, would you be willing to share what you discovered from the regional certification officer?
So recently, we reached out to OCM BOCES, they're our regional certification office, and asked them about the certification for our current teachers and what would it take for them to add on an additional certificate. Right now, they would have to get 30 additional credit hours, as well as take 2 additional exams to add this on as an additional certificate. But what they shared with me is next month, it's going to the Board of Regents, and it's open right now for public comment, so I'm working on doing a public comment to say that we do support the change, and what they've put on for a proposal is 18 credit hours instead of the 30, and potentially having 1 exam. So we're going to strongly encourage that the Board of Regents considers making that change, and then we'll start to talk to our teachers and see if we can get some excitement and interest in that. So wanted to share that. The timing was great. We just found that out.
It might be worth lobbying our own Honorable Patrick Mannion.
Yes, right, great. Thank you.
I was just curious, Sarah, if Sadie or son helped I think some of the play of the prom was done with ASL, correct?
I had no idea about
Oh, you didn't see it? Okay.
No, I saw it. It was a happy surprise.
I didn't know if it was ASL or what it was, but they were using sign. Oh.
Well, that's great. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. That's great news as well. So we'll just keep the club updated as to progress and decisions on that front. Okay? Thank you. All right. And is there anybody else for public comment? Okay. Great. Right. Moving into new business. Item 4.01, we have a SECRA resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius School District approve the SECRA resolution type 2 action bus proposition as presented. May I have a motion? Thank you, Dan. Second, Jason. Any discussion? All in favor? Anybody opposed or abstaining? Thank you. 4.02, the annual budget notice. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District approve the annual budget notice as presented. May I have a motion, please? Thank you, Cindy and Chrissy. And any discussion? All in favor? Anybody opposed or abstaining? Thank you. Okay. Item 4.03, policy approval. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District acknowledges the recent federal changes to the Title IX regulations and hereby waives first reading and approves of the following revised policies: 0100, 0110.2, 0115, and 0111 in second reading in order to comply with the recent federal amendments and rescinds policy 0110.1 in accordance with advice from legal counsel. May I have a motion? You may. Any, and Dan seconds. Anybody have a conversation, any discussion about that? Okay. Yep. Yes. Thank you. Okay, all in favor of tabling this item? Anybody opposed or abstaining? Okay, thank you. 4.04, so do we table? We table. Do we have to motion to table? Motion, same to table. Daryl and Dan also. Any discussion with this one? Nope. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay. Item 4.05. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District hereby authorizes the superintendent to execute the actions necessary for the district to join the class action suit versus Cintas Corporation in accordance with the guidance from legal counsel. May I have a motion, please? Thank you, Daryl, and second. Thank you, Cindy. Any discussion? All in favor? Anybody opposed or abstaining? Okay. All right. Ongoing business, item 5.01. Board petition packets are available from the district clerk and due at 5 p.m. on April 21st. Item 5.02, potential considerations for future meetings. Any discussion, questions with regards to that items? I guess the only thing I would ask related to our previous conversation is when the school start time committee is planning to kind of have a recommendation, if it's by the end of this academic year or later, if we could maybe pencil in some sort of targeted date, just keep us on track. Anything else? Okay. Item 6.01, future meeting calendars. So our next meeting is April 21st. Keep in mind that through the month of April is when we're going to be doing superintendent year-end review. So be on the lookout for those emails to come through from Super Eval. And we're also going to be working on developing next year's district goals with Dr. Tice. So plan your schedules accordingly to make sure you give it the time and attention it deserves. Then, boy, we only have 4 more meetings in this academic year. Crazy. Item 6.02, dates to remember. Lots of activities in the spring, gearing up, concerts and so on and so forth. Anything that anybody saw in there that was missing or wanted to highlight? Okay. And consent agenda, item 7.01. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District hereby approves the consent agenda as presented. And may I have a motion? Thank you, Daryl. Jason, second. All in favor? Anybody opposed or abstaining? Thank you. And item 8.01. So be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District hereby enters into executive session to discuss the appointment of a particular person as well as a student disciplinary action. May I have a motion, please? Chrissy, thank you, and Dan. All in favor? Anybody opposed or abstaining? Great, thank you. And we will be coming back from executive session to vote on one last item. So it's your decision if you want to stay or go. Thank you. Welcome back. So nice of you all to stick around. Thank you. All right, so item 9.01, personnel actions. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District hereby entered, oh, no, sorry, it didn't click. I was like, what? All right, I'll start over. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of Fayetteville-Manlius School District approve the following personnel actions as recommended by the superintendent. May I have a motion? Thank you, Dan and Daryl. Any discussion? All in favor? Anybody opposed or abstaining? Thank you. And then item 10.01, adjournment. Be it resolved that the Board of Education Fayetteville-Manlius School District adjourn the meeting at 8:18 p.m. Thank you, Jason and Christy. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you all for coming and sticking around. Have a wonderful evening.